When I was 17, I started working at my local grocery store. About 3 weeks in, I got transferred from the front end, baggers and cashiers, to produce. My first week in produce, I met all the people in my department and all was going well. One night on my second week in produce, I was closing alone when this girl comes in. My back turned to her. I hear, "Oh, you're new. When did you start?" I turn around and we start having a conversation while I put the last few things from my cart on the shelf. I had about 10 minutes left in my shift, and I was trying to go downstairs to crush my boxes, but this girl continued to talk and took no social cues that I was trying to leave. I finally get tired of listening to her talk, and I start to pull my cart through the produce section as she slowly follows, still talking. Eventually, we get to the employees only door, and I start to make my way through and she comes in right after me. I explain that unfortunately she can't come this way, and she needs to just go check out as our store was closing soon. She says bye and then leaves, and I thought it was odd, but maybe she's just a bit weird. I crush my boxes and go home, and I don't think about it. 2 days later, I'm closing again and the same thing happens. This time, she asked for my phone number. I explained that I didn't have a phone at this time, hence why I had a job so I could get one. "Okay, well, would you want to hang out when you get off?" I felt kind of bad at this point as I thought she was just a bit odd and looking for friends. I tell her maybe next time, as my mom was picking me up. So every night I worked, she would come in and just pick up one grapefruit and then walk around, basically acting like she was either on the phone or pretending to shop and then casually stop by me. It got old really quick, to the point of where I would hide in the hallway and watch her till she left. Eventually, other people in my store heard about her, and the rumors went around that she was stalking me. The deli manager explained that she and her boyfriend, she also worked in the deli, also had been stalked by her for a number of months. Eventually, she stopped coming by at night as I was always hiding when she did come. A few weeks go by and I had just gotten off of work. It was an early shift for a change, and my friends were meeting me at work to hang out after, 2 guys and a girl. So, I head out to the parking lot and I meet up with them, when my stalker comes out of nowhere and hugs me. "I haven't seen you at work in so long." "Oh, yeah, they switched my hours so now I don't work late anymore." Well, one thing leads to another and my female friend starts to talk with her, and basically invites her to hang out with us. She jumps on the opportunity. After, I explain to my friend that she was stalking me. And so we all start walking back to my friend's house to hang out in the backyard, as it was a nice summer night. The night wasn't bad. We all just hung out and kind of avoided the stalker, while my friend kept her entertained. The night came on pretty fast, and eventually, it was 1 a.m., and my friend's mom came out and told us that we had to leave. Me and my 2 male friends and the stalker head out, and we're waiting at the bus stop that my friend needed to catch, when the stalker explains that she can't go home this late and that she needed to stay over. So, I beg my other friend to stay with me, which he agrees. We wait for the bus to pick up my other friend and then head to my house. Things got super weird at this point. So basically, the stalker refused to sleep on the floor and only wanted to sleep in bed with me. I eventually gave up and said, "Okay, well my friend slept on the floor." So, I'm laying in bed and this girl just stands up and takes her clothes off and gets in bed with me. At first, I was pretty dumbfounded and didn't know what to do, so I acted like I didn't notice, and then she started to try to kiss me and grope me. At this point, I realized that this girl had issues. I lightly pushed her off of me and explained that I'm trying to sleep. She wouldn't take the hint and kept insisting that we cuddled. I was getting fed up, and so eventually, I tried to wake up my friend. I'm pretty sure he wasn't asleep at this point anyway. "Nathan, you asleep?" He sits up. "No, why?" And so she covers up with the blanket so he doesn't see her naked. And then I basically explain that I wanted to go for a walk. And so I have Nathan leave the room and get her dressed so we could go for a walk. On our way out, I told Nathan to get his bike. We walk outside at this point. It's almost 3:30 in the morning. Me and Nathan walking with our bikes and the girl beside us. I'm thinking of ways that we can get rid of this girl. At first, I suggest that Nathan and I just take a walk in the alley and go to the bathroom, but she says that she's scared and would want to go with us. Eventually, while walking and talking, she says that she's on the track team in high school. "Oh, you run track? I bet you can't beat us to the end of the block." At this point, Nathan looks at me and smirks as he knows that we're about to ditch this girl. For it to be 3:30 in the morning, this girl was excited as hell to go sprinting. She takes off running for the end of the block, and we take off the opposite direction back towards my house. We rush back inside and hide our bikes at my house instead of the porch, and go to the living room, making sure not to turn on any lights. We sit in the living room talking about how crazy this girl was when she starts banging on the door. We stayed quiet for what seemed like 2 to 3 hours of her just banging on the door, talking to herself, banging on the door and then talking to herself some more. Eventually, we heard the downstairs door open and we watch her leave. For reference, I lived on the second floor of an apartment building and my mom was out of town. So, the next few days I go to work and I don't see her, which is good. And then about a week later, she comes in and she completely ignores me. She gets her random grapefruit and pretends to shop while me and my coworker are talking. She is wearing a backpack this time, and she walks right in between me and my coworker. We were maybe 6 feet apart. And she turns to walk away and her backpack touches something on my flat cart. She turns around and starts screaming and throws all the boxes off my cart. She starts saying that I grabbed her and that she wanted to talk to a manager, and so my coworker, an older guy in his 40s, tells me to go downstairs and just to get away from the situation. I head downstairs and I sit in the break room. About 10 minutes later, I'm called up to the hallway where my store manager is talking to the girl. I see from the door that she leaves that he comes in the hallway to talk to me. "So, this girl says that you grabbed her, you shoved her, and that you were swearing at her." I explain what happened to my manager, and he goes and finds my coworker and then comes back to me after talking to him. My manager comes in and looks at me. We kind of chuckle and then he tells me, "Don't worry about it." Eventually, she left me alone, but then my girlfriend started working with me. The girl would come in and see me and my girlfriend and then go to her line to check out, and it was always really rude to her. Eventually, she stopped coming around altogether, and from the looks of it, she married some 50-year-old man on Facebook. She's like 24. Hi everyone, I'm French, so I apologize if my English isn't the best. I wanted to share an experience that still gives me chills. I was working in a carousel in a shopping mall, and this mall is known for being like the 3rd biggest mall in Europe. Anyway, the first time that I worked here, yeah, my parents owned it, so when I had free time, I would go here and work for a few hours after school. I was 13 and not really used to the Parisian life. I came from a small town in the south, so it was really weird for me to be here. But one day, a guy, maybe 20 to 30 years old, was sitting on a bench and looking at me. He seemed really nice, and at first I thought he was a parent or something looking at his child. But he was completely alone and only looking at me. I awkwardly smiled and said, "Hello," thinking that he needed some help. He kept smiling, and that's where I started to be scared. But I kept doing my work, looking at another bench to make him understand that I was uncomfortable. Maybe 5 minutes later, he moved, sitting on the bench that I was looking at. He was not really smiling, and he looked kind of disappointed. So I started looking up, because people could look at the carousel from there. When I looked down again, like 10 minutes later, the guy was gone. I thought he left, but he was still looking at me from the first floor, with that same smile. He stood there for an hour, and he continued changing spots so I would notice him. When I left work, he followed me, and so I told my coworker to accompany me until I got home. That was really creepy. Last year, I had a pause and I decided to go to the nearest bookshop, as I always did. And I found a book that I liked, some Tolkien book. and a guy maybe 15 to 16 looked at me and made a token reference. I laughed at his joke and then I just laughed. 20 minutes later, the same guy was on a bench next to the carousel and he looked at me. I smiled and he came to see me and asked for my number. I said I couldn't give my number to strangers, but he insisted. I then asked for his number and told him that I would text him when I would be done with work. I obviously never texted him. He came back like 2 days later after that, but I didn't see him. I noticed him following me when I was in the same bookshop. I was moving randomly to see if he was really following me, and he was. So I walked towards him and asked why he kept doing this. He said that he was in love with me, and then I reminded him of his ex-girlfriend and he really wanted to know me. I said that I was already in a relationship, and he said that it was okay. He could be a third wheel. So I said that I would text him whenever I felt like it, and he laughed. Maybe a month after that, I was going to a famous convention where I was cosplaying as a random maid. I was holding a free hugs cardboard sign with some random drawings on it. I was with 2 friends and we were having a lot of fun. When out of nowhere, someone jumped on me and hugged me. It was this dude. We called the security, and he kept screaming like hell that I was the love of his life and that he would kill himself. Apparently he had asked my coworker why I wasn't at work, and she thought that he was a friend of mine and said that I was going to the convention. Luckily, I never saw him after that. But he did have my number because my coworker gave it to him, and I blocked him, of course. Another time, it was during December 2018, so I had 2 jobs but in the same shopping mall. A guy, again maybe 20 to 30 years old with long hair, was sitting on a bench next to the carousel and he kept looking at me. He sat there all day and I noticed that he was sometimes raising his phone and moved the phone in my direction, as if he was taking a picture or filming me. I was 15 at the time, so he wasn't supposed to take pictures of younger people. Plus the way he looked at me was really weird, and I even caught him licking his lips while looking at me. I felt really uncomfortable, but kept on working and didn't say anything. The next day, I was working at my other job, which was another carousel actually. It was here just for the Christmas holidays, and I didn't see the guy. But when I left my job and was waiting for my parents to get ready so we could leave, the guy sat next to me, like really close, and asked for my phone number. I said no and he looked down, like disappointed, and asked, "Well, are you working tomorrow?" I replied, "I don't know. Why's that?" "Because I like your body." He stood up and left. I was paralyzed really, and the next day I told my coworker, Lionel, another coworker by the way, it was a Romanian guy, about what had happened. I couldn't sleep that night and was really paranoid about everything around me. And then I saw the guy and told Lionel to ask him to stop following me like that. He came back with a huge smile, saying that I'm not really kidding. "Oh, it's okay. You 2 will go out on a date." Apparently the guy told my coworker that he was a friend of mine and was messing with me. He said he was really shy and was playing this game so he would have the confidence to ask me on a date. I was feeling so strange, as if I was going to fall or something. I stopped working this afternoon and I told my parents. They told me to stay with them and immediately tell them if I saw the guy. When we were leaving, I swear I saw the guy with a hoodie under the rain looking at me and taking pictures of the car. The next day, I was with another coworker, Marie. She's really protective, by the way. She's like a sister to me. And I saw the guy on the bench next to the carousel. When I told her, she ran towards him and yelled at him, stuff that I couldn't hear, but I could see the guy's face and it was priceless. She came back with a big smile and the guy laughed. Apparently she said that she knows where he lives, and if she saw him around me for a second, she would blow his brains out. I never saw that guy again. When I was about 14 or 15 years old, my friend was having a birthday party at her house. It was only just girls until my boyfriend and another boyfriend of my friends attending the birthday girl's party insisted that we leave her house and walk to the local high school so we could meet them and continue to hang out and have fun. It was around at 2 a.m. in the morning when we were walking down a straight main road that eventually led to the high school. All of a sudden, this hillbilly, probably 40 years old, drives past us, slows down, and then stops and backs up to me and my two friends that were walking. He stops right in front of us, gets out of his car, walks up to us three and asks what us pretty young things are doing out so late. Me, being the most clever and brave, replied to him with some bullshit story about how our friends were having a party, and they started drinking, so we got uncomfortable and wanted to go to my house for the rest of the early morning. After I told him that, he stood there with his hands in his pockets, eyeing each of us up and down, all while looking back at his truck a few times. My friends and I definitely knew he was trying to figure out which one of us would be the easiest to grab and throw into his truck. I was the smallest of my two other friends, mind you, and he kept making eye contact with me over my other two friends. He stood there eyeing us for what felt like forever, but it was probably more like a couple of minutes. He eventually asked us if we wanted to ride home, or if just I wanted him to take me home. We replied that we were almost home when we didn't need it or want to ride. He stood there eyeing us up and down for another minute or so, deciding what to do, and he eventually got back into his truck without saying a word to any of us. When he drove off and was far enough away for us to start running, we jumped the small fence line in the high school and ran across the field to the tennis courts, where we were startled by my boyfriend, my friend's boyfriend, and another guy friend of ours. We told them what had happened, and we walked over to an alley that was on the end of the school, and it led back to the sidewalk and main road that we had just been walking on. While doing so, we heard some screeching tires and a car speeding as fast as they could back up the road. We saw it was the guy that we had just encountered, speeding directly back to where me and my friends were just walking. He stopped his truck, got out, and was walking around searching for most likely my friends and I. We all hid in some nearby bushes as we patrolled the sidewalk up and down. After a few minutes of searching for us, he got back into his truck and sped off in the opposite direction from which he came. We all ran to the other side of the school and took some inner-neighborhood streets to get to my friend's house to make sure he couldn't find us if he was still on the hunt. We assumed that he came back around as fast as he could, because he finally made the decision to pick one of us up and take off with us to do as he pleased. Thank God we dodged that creep that night. In 2019, I moved to a post-Soviet country for work. There is this American diner that I always go to on Saturdays for lunch. It's a one-of-a-kind place in the city, owned by this half-Cuban dude who loves the USA. Not surprisingly, the place attracts a lot of American expats who want to feel home. It takes me around 25 minutes to get there walking from my apartment, but as it gets extremely cold during the winter months, I always take a taxi that drops me off next to a big mall, on the opposite side of the narrow street where the diner is. The street is inaccessible by car. It's hard to describe it, but the best way to reach the restaurant's entrance is by crossing the fenced garden of an old wooden church. It was an Orthodox church from the 19th century turned into a museum. It's now surrounded by massive office buildings. The garden is small. You can cross it in 3 minutes, and the exit gate faces the restaurant. During winter, snow covers it completely. It was a Saturday morning, January if I recall correctly, and the snow was fresh on the floor. I was walking to the diner when I noticed unusual footprints in the snow, as if someone was walking in circles, back and forth for a long period. But there was nobody around, and all of the office buildings seemed to be closed. I keep walking. All of a sudden, a man that was hiding behind the church reveals himself. He doesn't look hostile, but there's something extremely odd about him. He was wearing baggy jeans, a dirty hoodie, and a blue cap. It was extremely cold, and this outfit was not the best for the weather. He approaches me smiling. He starts walking on my side. "Hey there," he said in English. "Hey? Where are you from? Don't be afraid, I like foreigners." The vast majority of the population there looks East Asian, so it's easy to tell that I'm not a local. But his English is surprisingly good. I keep walking in silence. "You don't need to be my friend. I'm part of the couch surfing community. I'm a nice guy, look. He tried to show me something on his phone, maybe his couch surfing profile page. Would you stay at my place? He says. No, dude, thank you, I say. And then he goes, okay, would you give me some money to buy us both coffee? You don't have to come with me. At that moment, I was already in the front of the restaurant and casually opened the door to enter. He didn't follow me. 2 weeks later, the same Saturday routine, lunch at the diner and then back home. On my way, I decided to grab a coffee at a nearby place. As I'm walking to the shop, I feel somebody following me. It's him. Again, and wearing the same clothing. We made eye contact and he starts laughing. And then he proceeds to do an extremely creepy thing. He hides behind a bus stop that has glass panels on the sides and keeps staring at me. I mean, I could still see him, and he was being a complete creep on purpose. I entered the coffee shop and I tell the barista, hey, there's a guy following me. The girl looked at me worried and says something to the security guard. It's common to see guards in all the shops here. The guy enters the shop. The moment the door closes behind him, the barista looks at the guard, who immediately removes him from the place. They were so fast that it almost seemed as if they knew him. Thankfully, I never saw him again. I just got off work. Today I worked 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Around 10:45, a man walks in. I've had previous odd encounters with this man, such as seeing him walk behind me around my neighborhood and him hanging out near my street. I brushed those off since I live right next to where I work, and figured he lived there also, but I always kept an eye on him. Anyway, the man comes in and orders his usual pastry. I work at a bakery, and he tells me, I'm gonna stay inside and eat my pastry. For anyone who doesn't know, my county is currently under lockdown because of the coronavirus, and all dining indoors is strictly prohibited. Not to mention, my bakery is tiny and there has never been any tables to sit inside, only a coffee bar that has never had space to sit. I tell him, we're on lockdown, you can't really eat inside. His response chills me. Are you alone here? Yes. I respond stupidly, but quickly try to catch myself. But my coworker will be here soon. A complete lie. It's only about 11 a.m., and my coworker isn't scheduled till 1 p.m. when I'm off. Well, then no one will see me in here. He responds and goes back to eating his pastry at the coffee counter. I roll my eyes in and go back to work, not getting paid enough to care if he quickly eats his pastry and then leaves. 10 minutes pass and then 15. This guy is still in my bakery. I look over and he has finished his pastry, and he has moved closer to the open space in the counter meant for employees to walk back and forth between the front of the store and the employees only side. Now, I'm starting to get uncomfortable. I quickly text my coworker, a 30-year-old man who owns a lot of guns and treats me like his little sister, 911. I look over again and now the man is even closer, and is now reading a book. He's putting the book in front of his face and peeking at me from above it, watching me. Multiple customers come in and out during his stay. Every time I turn my back to him, he gets closer and closer and closer, until eventually, he is halfway in our employee-only area. I begin frantically texting my coworker. He tells me that he's 4 minutes away. I finally make the decision to text my boyfriend. I'd avoided doing so to keep from scaring him, but now I was terrified. I sat in the back of the employee area, watching this guy. I held a knife just in case he decided to come any closer. Just as he takes a step closer, my coworker busts through the door. A confrontation ensues, and the man leaves the shop, but continues to sit in his parked car right out in front, and he stares at me. I tell my coworker about the previous experiences I've had with him, and he's had enough. He marches out to the guy's car and tells him next time he comes around, it'll be his last. My boyfriend pulls up at this point and joins in with the warnings. So Matthew, aka my stalker, let's not meet again. This all happened roughly around 3 to 4 years ago, but the experience has haunted me almost every single day since it happened. I'll start off by saying that at the time I was pretty young, single, and very keen to have my first experience with a guy. I spent a while looking through dating apps, talking to a few people until I finally came across a guy who seemed interesting, and we had a lot of things in common. So, I thought it would be a good idea to meet up with him, since we had been talking for almost a month. Now, even though I was only young, I wasn't naive or stupid. I was and still am a very cautious and paranoid person. But for some reason that day, I made what possibly could have been one of the worst decisions of my life. I invited him to come spend the night at my place. My parents were away for the weekend, and I had the place for myself, so it seemed like the perfect opportunity for him to come over. He lived around 3 to 4 hours away from my place, yet he was eager and almost desperate to come and see me. So, he set off as soon as he had finished work, which was around 11 a.m. This whole time he was driving to my place, I had the sickening sense of doom, almost as if something was going to go very, very wrong. I almost texted him multiple times to tell him that I wasn't interested anymore, but I hesitated as he was only 10 minutes away by this point. I jumped up as I heard his car pull up, and I expected to be greeted by a smile once I opened the door. But he pushed his way through and continued to stare at me blankly, all while my 2 French bulldogs snarled and growled at him, which they never ever do to anyone. Things instantly seemed extremely odd. He followed me quickly to my bedroom and didn't waste any time in aggressively undressing me, which I hesitantly went along with as this was my first experience with a guy. Especially as he was almost 6 years older than me, so I was pretty tense. Fast forward to a couple of hours later, he suddenly asked me if he could sleep in my room, which confused me, as it was only 5 p.m. but I told him that it was fine, and I would continue to watch movies by myself downstairs. After an hour or two, I heard what sounded like furniture being moved around and the sound of him talking. So, I made my way upstairs and opened my door, to find him crouching in the middle of my room and breathing extremely heavily. When I asked if he was okay, he motioned for me to get on the bed, where he sat me on his lap and proceeded to place a blindfold over my eyes and put his hands around my neck lightly. I was already feeling extremely uncomfortable, which worsened as he tightened his grip around my throat and said, "Does anyone know that I'm here? Do your friends know who I am and what I look like or anything?" I instantly answered, saying that my sister and friends who live nearby knew. This was a complete lie, as I don't have a sister, and my friends were unaware, but something inside of me forced me to say it. After minutes of awkward silence, he stood up to gather his things, and I noticed that in his backpack he had tape, rope, and handcuffs, which at first didn't concern me, as I knew he was into that stuff. But looking back, I think it was intended for something much worse. All of a sudden he said, "I think I'm gonna head home. I have a long drive and I'm kinda tired." I didn't hesitate to let him out the door, as I was already extremely uncomfortable. As he left, he failed to make any eye contact or say goodbye, and he raced off down the street as soon as he got into his car. I ran back to my room to check if he had left anything, as he left in a hurry, and I found a note on my desk with the words, "Being nice is what saved you." At the time, I had no idea what the note meant, but now that I think about it, I seriously think that he had some very ill intentions towards me. I'm still angry at myself for even letting a stranger into my home, which is obviously a big mistake, and I immediately blocked him on all of my social medias. I'm just so lucky that I made it out alive. All I know is that he is now somewhere back in America. I really don't know why he was living in the UK at the time that I met him, but all I can say now is that I'm glad that he is many miles away from me. This happened a couple of years ago when I was around 15, and I was hanging out with my 2 friends, Miranda and Daisy, who were the same age as me. We were bored and there was nothing to do in our town, so we decided to go for a walk around this other town about 25 minutes from ours. The place we live in is pretty dangerous, so we usually did something with our parents around. But we thought that the three of us walking around by ourselves wouldn't be an issue. Plus, in this other town, it would be fine, because we don't usually hear anything bad happening there and it's thought to be pretty safe. We went to the outside shopping center, which had plenty of retail stores and restaurants. We had a pretty great time at first. After we ate, we wanted to take a final walk around before calling my parents to come pick us up. And we start to walk towards this man who was just standing in the corner of the street with a green hat on and a mullet. The three of us were just walking and talking, and as we walked past him, he said, "Hi, how are ya?" while looking at the ground, so we didn't think anything of it. We kept walking and we didn't answer him. He then said loudly, "Do you want me to be afraid?" And we looked back and he was looking at us this time. We were confused and we continued walking. We were talking to each other, trying to figure out if he was even talking about us, and when I looked back, he was walking right behind us. I became extremely nervous, but my friend Miranda reassured us and said maybe he's just walking in our direction and not following us. Until we walked a couple of blocks and he was still right there. And that's when we walked by a bookstore. Miranda said, "Hey guys, didn't you want to check this store out?" and took our hands and pulled us into the store. We pretended to be interested in some of the books, until we saw that he entered the store too and sat down in a chair. We were all extremely panicked at that point because this man was definitely following us. We left the store immediately and we continued walking a lot quicker now, and I looked back and sure enough, he came out of the store to follow us again. After walking some more, I saw a Panera Bread and I grabbed their hands and brought them in there, and this time he didn't follow us inside. He kept walking. Daisy and Miranda were relieved and said, "Great, let's go." But I was not convinced, and I told them to wait because he could just be waiting for us at the end of the street or something. A couple minutes later, he shows up and he is waiting outside of the door. We didn't know what else to do, so I went to the cashier and told her that a creepy man was following us. She went to her manager and she tells me that the manager called the cops. They let us sit down in their store and they give us some free food and tell us that we look pale and terrified as well, which of course we are. Eventually, a cop comes in to take our statements and gets an idea of what he looks like to go look for him. When he comes back, he says that they found the man, and it's clear that he had some mental issues going on, and they didn't want to detain him. But they reassured us that he wasn't in the area anymore. We called our parents and mine came to pick us up. Daisy was crying. Miranda and I were trying to make light of the situation, but it was still very tense. We were still kind of scared and anxious because we weren't sure if the cops even really made sure this guy left the area. But we got to my parents' car safely, and I immediately ordered some pepper spray from Amazon. It still gives me chills thinking about that day. To this day, his words, "Do you want me to be afraid?" still confuse me because I don't know what he meant. And what was he even following us for? What was the goal? But thank goodness, we never had to find out.